Have you ever stood over a grave, certain you knew the story buried beneath it, only to find out you were the villain, not the victim? This is the story of a son who mocked the man who raised him, and the woman who forced him to face the truth he spent years running from. A truth that didn't just destroy his pride, it shattered the foundation of his entire life. Because sometimes the person you blamed was the one who loved you the most. And sometimes redemption doesn't arrive gently. It arrives in the hands of a woman who owes you nothing, yet carries the truth that could save your soul. Before we begin, I'd love to know where in the world you are watching from. Drop your country and city in the comments. And if stories about redemption, truth, and love that transform speak to your heart, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means everything. Now let's begin. The November sky hung heavy with clouds that threatened rain, but never quite delivered, as if even the heavens were undecided about morning. Taylor Briggs stepped out of his midnight blue Aston Martin, the soft click of Italian leather shoes against cemetery gravel the only sound in the vast silence. At 29, he wore wealth like a second skin, a charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, a Patek Philippe watch glinting at his wrist, sandy hair styled with calculated carelessness. His ocean blue eyes, which tabloids love to call striking, held nothing but bored resignation. Behind him, his publicist Anderson Paul hovered with a photographer, 6 months since the business titan, the philanthropist, the man who'd built an empire from nothing, had died of a heart attack in his office alone. "Make it look natural," Taylor muttered to the photographer without looking back. "Grieving son, dutiful heir, all that." He walked toward the marble headstone, nothing ostentatious despite his father's wealth. Richard Briggs had been practical even in death. The inscription was simple. Richard James Briggs. 1955-2022. He built bridges. Taylor had never understood that epitaph. His father had built office towers, not bridges. But as he rounded the hedgerow that separated the Briggs family plot from the main pathway, Taylor stopped abruptly. Someone was already there. A young woman knelt before his father's grave, her body curved in genuine grief. She wore a simple navy blazer over a white blouse, professional but clearly not expensive, and her natural curls fell forward as she bowed her head. Her smooth, dark skin glistened with tears that fell freely, unashamedly. In her trembling hands, she held a small bouquet of wildflowers, daisies and lavender, the kind you picked yourself rather than bought from a florist. Taylor's irritation flared immediately. This was a private moment. Well, a staged private moment, but still. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone who'd never been denied anything. "This is a private family plot. You need to leave." The woman's head snapped up, and for a moment, Taylor saw the raw devastation in her eyes before it hardened into something else. Something fierce. She stood slowly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, and Taylor found himself taking an involuntary step back. She was petite, barely 5'3", but the way she looked at him made him feel oddly small. "Private?" Her voice was low, controlled, but vibrating with barely contained emotion. "You've been here, 5 minutes? For a photo opportunity. I've been here an hour, grieving a man who actually deserved it." Taylor felt his jaw tighten. "And who exactly are you to judge how I mourn my father?" "Camille Foster." She said her name like a challenge. "Your father saved my life. Put me through university, gave me a career, a future, everything. While you—" She stopped herself, eyes flickering to the photographer who'd come up behind Taylor, camera raised. The click of the shutter was obscenely loud in the cemetery silence. Camille's expression shifted, grief giving way to disgust. She looked at Taylor, really looked at him, and he felt exposed in a way that was deeply uncomfortable. Those dark eyes saw through his expensive suit, his calculated posture, straight through to something he didn't want examined. "Enjoy your publicity, Mr. Briggs," she said quietly, but every word cut like glass. "Some of us are here because we actually loved him." She walked past him, shoulders straight despite the tears still streaming down her face. Taylor watched her go, caught between irritation and something he couldn't quite name. "Shame? No, he didn't do shame." "Did you get the shot?" he asked the photographer, turning away from the departing woman. "Got several," Anderson Paul finished, already typing on his phone. "The internet's going to eat this up." Taylor looked back at his father's headstone. The wildflowers Camille had left were simple, hand-picked, infinitely more personal than the elaborate arrangement his assistant had ordered. He found himself staring at them, at the water droplets that might have been rain or might have been tears. "Let's go," he said abruptly. "I have a lunch meeting." He didn't look back as he walked away, didn't see the way the clouds finally broke, rain falling on the fresh flowers like the tears of heaven his father would never receive, from his only son. Taylor woke up to his phone exploding, not literally, though the incessant buzzing made it feel that way. 53 notifications, 71, 92. He groaned, reaching for the device on his nightstand, squinting against the morning light filtering through his penthouse windows. The first message was from Anderson. "Call me now." The second was from his mother. "Taylor, what have you done?" The third was from his uncle Jonathan. "We need to talk about damage control." Frowning, Taylor opened Twitter, or X, or whatever it was called this week, and his stomach dropped. He was trending number 3 nationally, right between some political scandal and a celebrity breakup. Briggs Heir Cemetery confrontation rich boy problems. The video had gone viral. Someone, not his photographer, someone else who'd been at the cemetery, had captured the entire exchange. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Taylor in his expensive suit, bored expression, photographer in tow. Camille's tear-stained face as she stood, the wildflowers shaking in her hands. The audio was muffled but devastating. 5 minutes, photo opportunity. Grieving a man who actually deserved it. Some of us are here because we actually loved him. The comments were brutal. A justice warrior. Rich kid can't even pretend to care about his dead dad. Disgusting. Our Truth Seeker 2024. Who is this woman? She clearly loved Richard Briggs more than his own son did. Social justice now. The way she looked at him, that's the look you give someone who's beneath contempt. Taylor threw his phone across the room, watching it bounce harmlessly off his leather sofa. This was impossible. He'd controlled every narrative about himself for years. The playboy heir, the charming CEO in waiting, the face of young entrepreneurship. One woman with wildflowers was not going to destroy that. His phone, the second one for business, rang immediately. Anderson Paul's name flashed on the screen. "Have you seen—" Anderson started. "Yes. Your approval rating has dropped 17 points overnight." 17. "The board is panicking. Your mother called me 3 times. Your Uncle Jonathan wants an emergency meeting. So we do damage control. Issue a statement. Say the video lacks context." Taylor. Anderson's voice was strained. "People don't want context. They want blood. Your blood. They've been waiting for you to mess up, and you just handed them a gift-wrapped scandal." "Then what do you suggest?" Taylor snapped, moving to his kit paw and jabbing the button on his espresso machine harder than necessary. "Apologize. Publicly. Show remorse. Show humanity. The internet loves a redemption arc." Taylor's hand froze on his coffee cup. "You want me to apologize to some woman who clearly loved your father?" Anderson interrupted. "Yes, that's exactly what I want you to do. Because right now, she's the hero and you're the villain. And villains don't get to inherit billion-dollar companies." The line went dead. Taylor stood in his pristine kit paw, surrounded by imported marble and designer appliances, holding a cup of single-origin Ethiopian coffee that cost $40 per pound. Everything in his life was curated, controlled, perfect. except for this. He pulled up the video again, watching it through different eyes. Camille's face, he knew her name now, had known it for exactly 12 hours, showed such genuine grief. The kind of grief he should have felt, the kind of grief he couldn't remember ever feeling. Your father saved my life. What did that even mean? By noon, he received a voice note from his mother about the exploded situation and the strange woman. Your father sponsored dozens of people through school. It was his thing. Scholarships, mentorships. He believed in investing in potential. The way she said it, his thing, dripped with resentment that Taylor had never quite understood. Why would anyone resent charity? So she was one of his projects, Taylor said flatly. Great, that should make this easier. He began searching about her again. Camille Foster. Education, bachelor's in finance, master's in business administration, both from Columbia University. Current position, senior financial analyst, Briggs Industries. Taylor's stomach dropped. She worked for him, for his father's company, for the company he was supposed to be running, but had barely set foot in over the past 6 months. Tenure. 4 years. 4 years. She'd been there while his father was alive, had probably worked directly with him. While Taylor was in Monaco or Milan, or wherever the hell he'd been avoiding responsibility. He dug deeper, finding a staff photograph from some company event. Camille stood in the second row, professional smile, wearing a blazer that had probably been expensive for her, but was clearly off the rack. His father stood in the front row, and if Taylor looked closely, which he did, zooming in until the pixels blurred, he could see Richard Briggs' hand on her shoulder. Proud, paternal. Taylor slammed the laptop shut. Fine. She worked in his building, in his company. That made this simple. He'd go to her office, apologize with witnesses, let the PR team document it, and move on with his life. He didn't let himself think about why his hands were shaking as he called his driver. Briggs Industries headquarters occupied 30 floors of prime Manhattan real estate. Taylor had been to the building exactly 7 times in 6 months, always for board meetings, always in and out in under 2 hours. He didn't know where the cafeteria was. Didn't know that the 12th floor housed the innovation lab his father had been so proud of. Didn't know that the company ran a free daycare for employees' children, or that his father had personally interviewed every scholarship recipient. He knew the executive floor. That was enough. Except now he was on the 18th floor, finance division, feeling oddly like an intruder in his own family's company. Employees looked up as he passed, surprise and suspicion flickering across faces. He heard whispers. Is that Taylor Briggs? What's he doing down here? Did you see the video? His jaw tightened. Let them stare. Camille Foster's office was tucked at the end of a row of cubicles, a small windowed space that spoke of rising status but not yet a rival. Through the glass, Taylor could see her hunched over spreadsheets, natural curls pulled back in a practical ponytail, reading glasses perched on her nose. She wore a simple burgundy blouse, no jewelry except small gold studs. Professional, focused, nothing like the grieving woman from the cemetery. He knocked, once, sharp, authoritative. She looked up and the recognition in her eyes was immediate. So was something else, something that flickered and died before he could identify it. Then her expression settled into cool disgust. Security let you in, she said, her voice flat as she returned her attention to her computer screen. Or did you finally learn where your own company's departments are? Taylor felt his prepared speech, the one Anderson had written, the one about grief and misunderstanding, evaporate. I came to apologize for yesterday. The media has... The media? She cut him off, finally looking at him fully. You're here because your image took a hit, not because you mean it. So please, save your rehearsed contrition and let me get back to work. You don't know me. The words came out harder than he'd intended. You don't know what my relationship with my father was. Something in Camille's expression shifted. The contempt gave way to something worse. Pity mixed with fury. She stood slowly, and Taylor was struck again by how someone so small could seem so formidable. For just a moment her hand trembled. For just a moment something raw and painful flashed across her face. Grief, yes, but something more complicated underneath. Then it was gone, locked behind steel. "I know," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "that he spent 6 months trying to call you. I know because I sat in his office while he dialed your number over and over, hoping you'd pick up. I know that he watched every interview you gave, every vapid, self-congratulatory interview where you credited your prep school, your friends, your mother, everyone except him." Taylor felt something crack in his chest. "He never—" "I know," Camille continued, each word precisely placed like stones building a wall, "that he died at his desk at 7 in the evening, working late as always, and I know that he was holding his phone, that the last thing on his screen was your contact information, that he was trying to call you one more time when his heart gave out." The office suddenly felt airless. Taylor gripped the back of her visitor's chair, knuckles white. "Stop." "Why? Because it hurts?" Camille's eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. "He spent many years hurting, Taylor. Many years wondering what he'd done wrong. Why his brilliant, charming son looked at him like he was nothing. He was cold." The words exploded out of Taylor, years of resentment boiling over. "He treated my mother like she was invisible. Their marriage was a graveyard long before he died. I watched him kill every ounce of warmth in our house, turn it into a mausoleum where nobody spoke, nobody laughed. So forgive me if I didn't rush to his deathbed." The silence that followed was crushing. Camille stared at him, and Taylor saw something shift behind her eyes. Not agreement. Something else. Something that looked like a decision being made. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and she took a breath that seemed to hurt. "You want to know why?" Her voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "Do you really want to know why your father was cold?" "I know why. Because he chose his company over his family? Because work was more important than—" "Your father found your mother with another man." The world stopped. Taylor's brain couldn't process the words. They sat there, foreign and impossible, making no sense. "What?" Camille's hands were shaking now, visibly shaking, but she pressed on. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, and something in her expression looked almost like she was in pain. Like telling him this was costing her something personal. "You were 12 years old. Your father came home early from a business trip, wanted to surprise you for your birthday. He found your mother in their bedroom with someone else." "That's a lie." Taylor's voice sounded distant to his own ears. "My mother would never—" "His name was David Richardson. He was your father's best friend from college. Your mother had been seeing him for 2 years. The office walls seemed to be closing in. Taylor's vision tunneled, focusing on Camille's face, searching for any hint of deception, of manipulation. He found none, only grief, only truth, and something else. Something in the way she looked at him, with such focus, such intensity, as if his reaction mattered to her personally. "No," he whispered. "She told me. She said he stopped loving her, said he became distant, cold, that he pushed her away." "He caught them," Camille's voice broke, tears streaming down her face now. "He caught them, and he forgave her. For you. Because you were 12 years old and he couldn't bear to destroy your image of your mother. So he stayed in a marriage that had been gutted, lived like a ghost in his own home because he loved you more than his own pride." Taylor's legs gave out. He collapsed into the visitor's chair, head in his hands, unable to breathe. And Camille, fierce, strong Camille, had to grip her desk. "He never told me," Taylor managed, his voice cracking. "He never said anything." Camille sat down across from him, her own composure crumbling. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost tender despite the devastating words. Because he knew it would destroy you. She pulled a tissue from her desk drawer, wiping her eyes with shaking hands. He told me everything 6 months ago, and he needed someone to talk to. Someone who wasn't family, wasn't entangled in all the pain. He cried. The words came out broken, raw. This brilliant, powerful man who'd built an empire from nothing, he broke down in his office because his son looked at him with contempt. Because every time you ignored his calls, every birthday you spent somewhere else, every choice you made to hurt him. It proved to him that he'd failed, that he'd sacrificed his marriage, his happiness, and still lost his son anyway. Taylor couldn't speak, couldn't move. His entire understanding of his life was collapsing like a building with its foundations removed. And Camille watched him break apart, her own face showing such naked pain. He asked me. Camille's voice broke completely. She looked away, pressing her fingertips to her eyes. He asked me what he'd done wrong, how he'd failed you so completely, and I didn't know what to tell him because from everything he showed me, from every story he told, you were his entire world. When she looked back at Taylor, there was something in her eyes that he couldn't quite read. Stop, Taylor managed, but there was no force behind it. Please stop. He never stopped loving you, Camille said, tears flowing freely now. Every time he looked at you, he saw disappointment. So he poured everything into this company, into people like me, because at least here he could make a difference. At least here people wanted what he had to give. Taylor was openly crying now, in front of a woman he'd met yesterday. His shoulders shook with sobs he'd never allowed himself. Every memory was being rewritten, recontextualized. Your public apology, she said quietly, standing abruptly and turning away from him. Save it. The man who deserved it is dead, and nothing you say now will change that he died thinking you hated him. The words should have been cruel. Instead, they were simply true. And truth, Taylor was discovering, was infinitely worse than cruelty. He walked to her office window, looking out at the city his father had loved. The city where Richard Briggs had built something meaningful, while his son partied and squandered and judged. Why did you tell me? Taylor asked, his voice raw. You could have let me keep believing my version. It was easier. Camille was silent for a long moment, her back still to him. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Because he deserved better than to die with you thinking he was the villain. She paused, and her next words came out quieter, almost painful. And because watching you destroy his legacy through neglect and arrogance, I couldn't let that happen without you knowing what you were really destroying. Taylor turned to face her. His legacy? For the first time, something flickered across Camille's face that wasn't anger or grief. It was concern and something else, something protective. You don't know, do you? She said quietly. You have no idea what's happening to this company. What are you talking about? Camille studied him for a long moment, as if weighing something heavy. Finally, she sighed. Taylor, when was the last time you actually looked at company reports, attended a real meeting, reviewed division performance? I attend board meetings. My Uncle Jonathan handles... Your Uncle Jonathan. Camille's expression shifted into something unreadable. Right, of course. What's that supposed to mean? She shook her head, moving toward her office door in clear dismissal. Nothing. Forget I said anything. You should go. I have work to do. Unlike some people, I actually have to earn my position here. But Taylor didn't move. Something in her tone and the way she'd said his uncle's name triggered an instinct he'd nearly forgotten he had. His father's instinct, the one that had built an empire. Camille. He used her first name intentionally, carefully. What's wrong with the company? Ask your uncle. He's the one running it. I'm asking you. She turned back and the look she gave him was withering. Why would I tell you? So you can ignore it like you ignored everything else your father tried to share with you? The barb hit home, but Taylor pushed through it. Because I'm pleading? Camille watched him carefully, and Taylor had the distinct impression he was being evaluated, measured against some internal standard he couldn't see. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly, and for a moment, something vulnerable showed through. You want to honor your father now? She finally said. Fine. Prove it. Actually show up. Learn what this company does, then maybe we can talk about what's going wrong. Why won't you just tell me? Because... She stopped, frustration and something else warring in her expression. Because you don't deserve easy answers. She moved past him to her door, opening it in clear dismissal. He nodded and walked through the finance division with his head down, ignoring the stares and the whispers. He made it to his car before the sobs started again. His driver, wisely, said nothing as Taylor fell apart in the back seat. That night, Taylor sat alone in his penthouse with a bottle of his father's favorite scotch, a bottle he'd never opened because he'd always thought it pretentious. He poured a glass and stared at his phone. His mother's number was right there, and he dialed it. Taylor, it's late. Is it true? His voice was surprisingly calm. Did you have an affair with David Richardson? The silence on the other end of the line was answer enough, but Taylor needed to hear it. Needed her to say it. Taylor, I don't know what... Is it true? Louder now, the calm fracturing. Did Dad catch you? Did he forgive you? Did he stay in that marriage for me while I blamed him for everything wrong? He heard her breathing, shaky and afraid, then quietly, yes. The word hung in the air between them, destroying and clarifying simultaneously. Why? Taylor asked, his voice breaking. Why did you let me think he was the villain? Why did you let me hate him? Because I couldn't, Margaret's voice cracked. I couldn't forgive myself. She started rambling, giving multiple excuses amidst tears. God, Taylor, I'm so sorry. I tried to tell you after the funeral, but I thought it was too late to matter. He died alone, Mom. Taylor's voice was barely a whisper. He died holding his phone, trying to call me one more time. And I was at a party in Monaco that I don't even remember, with people whose names I don't know. Because I was so sure he didn't deserve my time. Taylor, I have to go. He hung up before she could say anything else. If this story is touching your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. And please share this with someone who needs to hear about second chances and redemption. Now let's continue. The scotch tasted like regret. Taylor sat in his designer penthouse, surrounded by expensive things he didn't need, thinking about a man who'd built bridges, metaphorical ones, between people, between potential and opportunity, while his son had been busy burning them all down. I'm sorry, Dad, Taylor whimpered to himself, to the memory, to the ghost that would haunt him forever. I'm so sorry, but I'm listening now. Finally, I'm listening. But pain, Taylor was beginning to realize, was the price of finally growing up. Taylor arrived at Briggs Industries at 6:30 the next morning, catching the sunrise from his father's old office. He hadn't been here in 6 months, had only attended few meetings at the boardroom. Mr. Briggs? Taylor turned to find an older woman in the doorway, surprise clear on her face. I'm Patricia Holloway. I was your father's executive assistant for 23 years. Ms. Holloway, I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself before, Taylor started. You should have done a lot of things. Patricia's words were gentle but devastating. Patricia studied him for a long moment. You talked to Camille Foster. How did you... She called me last night, said you might actually show up this time, said I should give you a chance. Patricia moved into the office, pulling a file from her tablet. Your father would have wanted that. So against my better judgment, I'm going to help you. She handed him the tablet, already open to a financial overview. This is what the board sees. Steady profits, healthy margins, strong performance across all divisions. Taylor scanned the numbers. Everything looked solid. Okay? Now look at this. She swiped to a different view. This is the actual cash flow analysis. The board doesn't request this level of detail. They trust the executive team to manage it. But your father always reviewed it personally. Taylor's business degree from Princeton wasn't just decorative. As he studied the numbers, the pattern Camille had hinted at became clearer. Money was flowing out to various subsidiaries and shell companies, then disappearing. Not into investments or acquisitions or anything that added value, just gone. How much? He asked quietly. In the 6 months since your father died, approximately $120 million. Taylor's head snapped up. That's impossible. The auditors would have caught. The auditors review what they're given to review. Your father always did his own forensic analysis precisely because he knew how easy it is to hide money in a company this size. Patricia's expression was grim. I'll have the files sent to your secure drive within the hour, Patricia continued. But Taylor, you can't do this alone. You need someone who understands the financial architecture of this company. Someone your father trusted. Camille, Taylor said quietly. Camille, Patricia confirmed. She knows this company's finances better than anyone except your father did. He was training her, grooming her for CFO eventually. She has the skills you need. She hates me. She hates what you represent, the son who threw away what her mentor cherished most. Patricia gathered her things. But if you prove you're serious about honoring your father, about protecting what he built, Camille Foster is fiercely loyal to people who earn her respect. Your father earned it. Now you need to do the same. After Patricia left, Taylor sat alone in his father's office, surrounded by ghosts and regrets. He looked at the photograph of himself at 10, carefree and loved, and made a decision. He wasn't that boy anymore, could never be that boy again. But maybe, just maybe, he could become someone his father would have been proud of. He picked up the phone and called Camille's extension. She answered on the third ring. Foster. It's Taylor Briggs. He paused, swallowing his pride. I need your help. Please. The silence stretched so long he thought she'd hung up. With what? Her voice was guarded. Someone's stealing from this company, from my father's legacy. Patricia Holloway says you're the only one who can help me figure out who. Another pause. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. He heard her sigh. My office, 1 hour. And Taylor? If this is some PR stunt, if you're not genuinely committed to this, I will make the rest of your life very uncomfortable. Are we clear? Crystal clear. She hung up without saying goodbye. When Taylor arrived at Camille's office exactly 1 hour later, she was ready. Her desk was cleared except for her laptop and several thick folders. She'd changed into a different blouse. Still professional, still modest, but Taylor found himself noticing details he'd forced himself to ignore yesterday. The graceful line of her neck, the intelligence in her dark eyes. The way she held herself with such quiet strength, he pushed the thoughts away immediately. This was business. This was about his father. Sit, Camille said without preamble, not looking up from her screen. Patricia sent me the preliminary files. I've been through the first 3 months of transactions. Taylor sat, pulling out his own tablet. And it's sophisticated. She finally looked at him, and Taylor saw grudging respect mixed with lingering suspicion. Whoever is doing this understands shell company structures, international transfer protocols, subsidiary hierarchies. They're moving money through legitimate channels, just not for legitimate purposes. She turned her laptop so he could see. Look here, this is a payment to Meridian Consulting LLC for strategic advisory services. $8 million. Okay, and? Meridian Consulting doesn't exist. Well, it exists on paper. Incorporated in Delaware, registered agent, the works. But if you dig deeper, she clicked through several screens. The incorporation documents were filed by a law firm that specializes in anonymous corporate structures. The listed address is a P.O. box. There's no website, no public client list, no employees listed on LinkedIn. It's a ghost. Taylor leaned closer, studying the screen. Their shoulders were almost touching. He caught a hint of her perfume, something subtle, floral, focus. How many transactions like this? In 6 months, dozens, but they're careful. No single transaction is large enough to trigger automatic review. They're staying just under the thresholds that would require board approval or external audit. Which means it's someone who knows those thresholds intimately. Executive level, Camille confirmed. Someone with deep knowledge of company financial protocols. Taylor felt something cold settle in his stomach. My uncle Jonathan has been on the board for 20 years. He was my father's right hand. Camille's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Jonathan Sterling. Board chairman, your mother's brother. He raised me as much as my parents did. More than my father, I thought. Taylor's laugh was bitter. He was at every soccer game, every school play. My father was always working, but Uncle Jonathan made time. Or appeared to, Camille said quietly. Taylor looked at her sharply. What do you mean? She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Her voice softened slightly and Taylor caught something in her expression. Concern? Something almost protective. Your father talked about Jonathan sometimes, said he loved you deeply, which was part of why their relationship was complicated. Complicated how? Jonathan always wanted children. He and his wife tried for years, couldn't conceive. Your father thought maybe Jonathan resented him a little, for having what he couldn't, for having you. Taylor sat back, processing. He never said anything. Would you have listened if he had? Camille's tone wasn't cruel, just honest. But there was something in her eyes, sympathy, understanding, that made the truth less harsh. No, he wouldn't have. Would have defended Uncle Jonathan, accused his father of jealousy or paranoia. We need proof, Taylor said, redirecting. Can you trace where the money goes after it hits these shell companies? That's harder. International transfers, cryptocurrency conversions, offshore accounts. It's a maze designed to lose people. Camille pulled up another screen. But your father left notes. He was tracking something in his final months. Patricia gave me access to his private files. She opened a folder labeled simply RB, Personal Investigation. Inside were dozens of documents, screenshots, handwritten notes in his father's distinctive script. Taylor's throat tightened seeing that handwriting. His father's careful notation. JS approved 3 separate formary transfers in 2 weeks. Unusual. And below it, JS purchased yacht in Monaco, 6 match, same time frame. Coincidence? JS Jonathan Sterling. He knew, Taylor whispered. He knew his own brother-in-law was stealing from him. He suspected, Camille corrected gently. He was building a case, but he was also conflicted. Look at this note. She pointed to a document dated 2 weeks before Richard Briggs died. Must be wrong. Jonathan loves Taylor like a son, would never betray family this way. Need more evidence before accusing. Could destroy T's relationship with only father figure he respects. Can't do that to my son. Taylor had to look away. His father had known someone was stealing from him, had suspected his own brother-in-law, but had hesitated because he didn't want to hurt Taylor. Didn't want to destroy another relationship for his son. He protected me, Taylor said, his voice rough. Even from this. Even when it was killing him. He loved you, Camille said simply, and the way she said it, with such certainty, such conviction, made Taylor look at her. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, and something in her expression was so raw, so personal, that it took his breath away. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt charged with something Taylor couldn't name. Then Camille looked away, clearing her throat. We need to prove it, not just suspect. Prove it beyond any doubt. Can you help me do that? Taylor studied her for a long moment. There was something about Camille Foster that he couldn't quite figure out. The way she talked about his father with such intimate knowledge. The way she seemed to care so deeply about his pain. The way she looked at him sometimes, when she thought he wasn't watching, with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Why?" he asked suddenly. "Why are you really helping me?" Camille stiffened. "Because it's his legacy." "Because someone is trying to destroy what—" "No." Taylor leaned forward. "There's something else. The way you talk about my father, the way you look at me sometimes. Like you're searching for something." Color rose in Camille's dark cheeks. She turned back to her computer, her voice carefully controlled. "Your father was my mentor. He saved my life. Of course I care about his legacy. That's not what I'm talking about." "Then you're imagining things." But her hands trembled slightly on the keyboard. "Are we investigating this or not?" Taylor wanted to push, wanted to understand the complicated emotions he saw flickering across her face. But he also knew when to back off. "Okay," he said quietly. "We'll do it. But Camille, if we do this, if we really go after Jonathan Sterling, it's going to get ugly. He's powerful, connected, and if he realizes we're investigating him—" "I don't care," she said, echoing his words from earlier. Then softer. "Your father deserves justice, whatever it costs." The way she said it, with such fierce determination, made Taylor's chest tight. This woman, who barely knew him, who had every reason to hate him, was willing to risk everything to protect his father's legacy. "Then we start tonight," he said. "We have months of transactions to analyze, patterns to find, connections to trace. It's going to be long hours, hard work." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Camille said, meeting his eyes. "The question is, are you?" "I'm not afraid anymore. Not of work, not of the truth. Not of whatever this costs me." Something in Camille's expression softened. "Your father used to say the same thing. Then I'd find him asleep at his desk at 3 a.m., spreadsheets still open on his computer. He really did that? Every week. Sometimes multiple times a week." A small smile played at her lips, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. He cared, Taylor, about this company, about the people who worked here, about building something that mattered. He cared so much it literally killed him. The words hit like a physical blow, but Taylor didn't look away. "Then let's make sure it wasn't for nothing." Camille nodded, and for the first time since they'd met, Taylor saw something like approval in her eyes. Maybe even the beginning of trust. "We'll need to be careful," she said. "If Jonathan suspects we're investigating, he could destroy evidence. Cover his tracks." "Then we'll be smarter than him." Taylor pulled his chair closer to her desk, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Show me what you've found so far. Teach me what to look for." And so they began. Two people brought together by a dead man's love, one trying to earn redemption, the other carrying secrets she couldn't quite bring herself to share. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were both already lost. Taylor to the guilt he could never quite outrun. And Camille to a love she'd been fighting since the first time Richard Briggs showed her a photo of his son and said with such hope in his voice, "Someday when he's ready, I think you two should meet." The next 4 weeks were the hardest of Taylor's life, and the most meaningful. He and Camille fell into a rhythm. Mornings in his father's office reviewing high-level strategy, afternoons in conference rooms interviewing division heads and financial officers, evenings in Camille's office doing the detailed forensic work his father had started. His father hadn't just built a company, he'd built a philosophy, a belief that business could be a force for good, that profit and purpose weren't mutually exclusive. And someone had been systematically looting it. "He's been careful," Camille said one evening, 4 weeks into their investigation. It was nearly midnight. They'd ordered Chinese food hours ago. The containers sat forgotten on her desk. Never approves the full transaction himself, always has someone else countersign. But look. She highlighted a series of transactions. Every single ghost payment has his initial approval. He starts the chain, then hands it off to someone else to finish. So he can claim he didn't know where the money was really going, Taylor said, rubbing his tired eyes. Plausible deniability. Exactly. He's been planning this for years, Taylor. This isn't opportunistic theft. It's systematic embezzlement with a long timeline. Taylor stood, moving to her window. The city sparkled below, his father's city. How much total? My best estimate? 130 million over 6 months. But it might have been going on longer. Your father only started investigating in his final months. Over $100 million. Stolen by a man Taylor had called uncle. A man he'd loved more than his own father. We need to confront him, Taylor said. Not yet. Camille joined him at the window. She was close enough that he could feel her warmth. Close enough that he noticed she smelled like jasmine and something uniquely her. We need to trace where the money went. We have the theft, but we need to prove it ended up in Jonathan's accounts. Otherwise, he'll say the approvals were legitimate and the recipients are the criminals. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe. International finance law, cryptocurrency tracking, offshore banking secrecy. It's not simple. Taylor turned to face her. In the dim light of her office, exhausted and focused, Camille looked both fierce and beautiful. He found himself noticing details he'd forced himself to ignore. The curve of her neck, the intelligence in her dark eyes, the way she chewed her bottom lip when concentrating, and something else. The way she sometimes looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching. With an expression that was complicated, care mixed with pain, hope mixed with fear, something deeper that she quickly hid whenever he caught her. Why are you helping me? He asked quietly. Really, you don't owe me anything. You probably still hate me for how I treated my father. Camille was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful, measured. I did hate you. For 6 months, I hated you. Every time your father looked sad, every unanswered call, every birthday he spent working because he had nowhere else to go, I hated you for that. The words should have hurt. Instead, Taylor felt grateful for her honesty. But, he prompted, but these past 4 weeks, I've seen you actually try, actually care. Stay up until midnight reviewing financial documents because you want to understand, not because someone's forcing you. Ask questions about employee programs and scholarship recipients and community impact. She turned to face him fully, and her eyes held something he couldn't quite name. You're not doing this for publicity or image. You're doing it because it matters to you now. Taylor returned to the window, looking out at the city. Camille, these past 4 weeks, working with you, learning about my father's real legacy, trying to fix what I broke. It's been the most meaningful time of my life. And I know I have no right to say this. I know you see me as the son who failed, but— Don't! Camille interrupted quietly, but her voice was strained. Taylor turned. Don't what? Don't say what I think you're about to say. She wasn't looking at him, focused intently on her computer screen. But her hands were shaking slightly on the keyboard. You're grieving. You're trying to make amends. You're building me into some kind of symbol. But I'm not that, Taylor. I'm just someone who's trying to help you honor a good man. That's not what this is, isn't it? Now she did look at him, and her eyes were carefully neutral. But he caught something underneath. Fear. Vulnerability. Taylor, you're in a fragile place emotionally. You've had your entire understanding of your life shattered. Your relationship with me, professional, collaborative, it's probably the only positive thing you have right now. It's natural to conflate that with other feelings. You're wrong, Taylor said firmly, moving closer. I'm not conflating anything. Yes, I'm grieving. Yes, I'm trying to make amends. But Camille, the way I feel when I'm with you, that's real. The way you challenge me, the way you've refused to let me coast on excuses, the way you talk about my father with such love, I'm drawn to you. Camille stood abruptly, creating more distance. Her chest was rising and falling quickly, and when she spoke, her voice trembled. Taylor, stop, please. We're working together. That's all this is. That's all it can be. Why? Because— She stopped, closing her eyes, and Taylor saw her physically fighting something. Because I can't be your redemption. I can't be the prize you win for finally becoming a decent person. That's not fair to me, and it's not real. It feels real, Taylor said quietly. Feelings aren't always truth. Camille gathered her things, movements sharp with emotion. I think we should call it a night. We're both tired, emotional. Let's focus on the investigation. That's what matters. She walked past him toward the door and Taylor let her go. But as she reached the threshold, he called out, "Camille?" She stopped but didn't turn. I know you don't believe me now, but I want you to know. I know my feelings are real. I'm going to bring Jonathan to justice. I'm going to protect my father's legacy. And I'm going to prove to you that what I feel is real. Not because I want something from you, but for who you are. The brilliant, fierce, loyal woman my father saw. The woman I'm grateful every day that I finally had the sense to see too. Camille's shoulders were tight. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, without turning around, she said quietly, her voice cracking slightly, "Your father used to say that love is proven through action, not words. Prove it, Taylor. Not to me, to yourself. Become the man you claim you're becoming, investigation or no investigation, me or no me. Do it because it's right." Then she was gone, leaving Taylor alone in her office with the ghost of her perfume and the echo of words that felt like both a rejection and a challenge. But Taylor had heard something else in her voice, something she couldn't quite hide. Fear, yes, but also hope. 2 weeks later, Taylor sat in a private conference room with Camille, Patricia Holloway, and 3 attorneys from the firm his father had personally retained for sensitive matters. Spread across the table were thousands of pages of evidence, transaction records, shell company registrations, international wire transfers, property purchases in Jonathan Sterling's name that perfectly correlated with major fund diversions. "It's airtight," the lead attorney Rebecca Chen said with satisfaction. "We have the theft, the destination of funds, and proof that Jonathan Sterling personally benefited. The DA will move forward with criminal charges, and we can file civil suits for recovery of assets." Taylor should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt hollow, because tonight, at the emergency board meeting he'd called, he would destroy the only father figure he'd respected for most of his life. "Are you ready for this?" Camille asked quietly. They were alone now, the attorneys gone to prepare formal filings. "No," Taylor said honestly, "but it needs to be done. He'll fight back, try to discredit you, make it about your past behavior. Let him. Everything he says will be true. I was a terrible son. I did neglect the company. I did waste years." Taylor looked at her and found her watching him with an expression he'd seen more and more lately. Something soft, something almost tender. "But I'm not that person anymore, and he can't change the evidence." Camille nodded. Over the past 2 weeks, they'd maintained careful professional distance. No late nights alone together. No personal conversations, just the work. But Taylor had noticed things, the way her face softened when she talked about his father's employee mentorship program. The way she stayed late even when he'd gone home, driven by the same need for justice. The way she sometimes caught him looking at her and quickly looked away, color rising in her cheeks. She felt something too. She was just afraid of it, and Taylor was learning patience. "After tonight," he said carefully, "after the board meeting and the DA and everything, I want to thank you properly. For everything you've done, for saving my father's legacy, for helping me become someone actually worthy of respect." "Taylor, as colleagues," he interrupted gently, "as partners in this investigation. Nothing more if that's what you want. But Camille, you deserve to be thanked. You deserve to be celebrated for what you've accomplished here." She studied him for a long moment, and something in her expression shifted, softened. "You have changed. You think so?" The Taylor Briggs I met at the cemetery wouldn't have taken no for an answer. Wouldn't have respected my boundaries, would have pushed and assumed his charm would win the day. A small smile played at her lips. This Taylor? The one who listens, who respects, who works hard without needing recognition? He's different. Better? Taylor asked, hope rising in his chest. Much better. Her eyes held his, and for a moment, Taylor saw something naked and vulnerable there. Something that looked almost like longing before she looked away. Your father would be really, really proud of you right now. The words nearly broke him. Taylor nodded, not trusting his voice, and gathered his files. The board meeting starts in an hour. I should get ready. Taylor? Camille called as he reached the door. He turned. Her eyes were bright, and when she spoke, her voice was soft. Whatever happens tonight, know that you're doing the right thing. And that your father is watching, and he's so, so proud. The boardroom of Briggs Industries was designed for power. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that seated 20, leather chairs that cost more than cars. Taylor stood at the head of the table, his father's seat, and felt the weight of responsibility his father had carried for decades. The board filtered in, division heads, outside directors, legal counsel, and Jonathan Sterling, board chairman, looking concerned but confident in his expensive suit and political smile. Taylor, Jonathan said warmly, moving to embrace him. Good to see you taking initiative. Your father would be pleased. Taylor accepted the hug, feeling sick. This man had stolen from his father, had probably contributed to the stress that killed him. Every comfort had been a lie from a thief's mouth. Thank you for coming on short notice, Taylor said once everyone was seated. I know this is unusual, calling an emergency session, but there's a matter that requires immediate board attention. Of course, Jonathan said smoothly. Though I have to say, Taylor, you could have discussed this with me first. As chairman, I'd have been happy to help you understand proper procedure. This concerns you directly, Jonathan. So no, I couldn't discuss it with you first. Something flickered in Jonathan's eyes. I'm not sure I understand. You will. Taylor nodded to Patricia, who began distributing bound folders to each board member. For the past 6 weeks, I've been conducting an investigation into financial irregularities at Briggs Industries. Irregularities my father identified before his death, but didn't have time to fully document. The room went silent. Jonathan's smile never wavered, but his hands tightened on his armrests. What you're looking at is evidence of systematic embezzlement spanning at least 3 years, possibly longer. $260 million diverted from company accounts to shell companies, then transferred to offshore accounts. And eventually, Taylor looked directly at Jonathan, to properties, investments, and accounts belonging to Jonathan Sterling. That's absurd, Jonathan said, but his voice had lost its warmth. Taylor, I understand you're going through a difficult time, dealing with your father's death, your guilt. My guilt is irrelevant to this evidence. Taylor kept his voice steady. Page 12, everyone. You'll see the authorization chain for payment to Meridian Consulting, LLC. Jonathan's initial approval started the process. Page 18, you'll see Meridian Consulting's incorporation documents, filed by a law firm Jonathan's personal attorney uses. Page 23, wire transfers from Meridian to accounts in the Cayman Islands. And page 31, those same funds transferred to purchase a yacht currently registered to Jonathan Sterling. Around the table, faces were hardening as board members read. Jonathan stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this slander from a child who spent the past 3 years partying while actual adults ran his father's company. Sit down, Taylor said quietly, and something in his voice made Jonathan pause. You're right that I wasted 3 years. You're right that I was a terrible son who didn't deserve my father's love. But you know what? He loved me anyway, protected me anyway, even from you. Taylor pulled out another document. This is from my father's private investigation file, a note dated 2 weeks before he died. He'd figured out what you were doing, Uncle John. He had most of the evidence. But he hesitated to move forward because he wrote, and I quote, can't destroy T's relationship with only father figure he respects. Must be completely certain before accusing. His voice broke slightly. He died protecting me from the truth about you. Died knowing you were stealing from him but afraid to tell me because he didn't want to hurt me. Again. Taylor! Jonathan's voice had changed, taking on a pleading quality. He loved you, Taylor continued, tears streaming down his face now. Considered you his brother, not just his brother-in-law, trusted you with everything. And you robbed him. You literally stole from a man who would have given you anything if you'd just asked. You don't understand, Jonathan said desperately. I built this company as much as Richard did. I was there from the beginning, working just as hard, but it was always his name on the building. His legacy. I have nothing. You had his love, Taylor shouted, slamming his hand on the table. You had his trust, his respect, his friendship. You had me calling you uncle, looking up to you. You had everything that mattered, and you traded it for money. Says the spoiled heir who never had to work for anything, Jonathan shot back, his mask finally slipping completely. You who ignored your father's calls, who embarrassed him with your behavior, who couldn't even be bothered to visit him in the hospital the week before he died. Don't you dare lecture me about loyalty. He was in the hospital? Taylor's voice was barely a whisper. The room went silent. What? Taylor looked around wildly. What hospital? When? Patricia Holloway spoke quietly. Your father had chest pains, mild heart attack. He was admitted for 3 days for observation, a week before the final attack. He didn't want anyone to know, made me promise not to call you. He specifically said not to tell Taylor, Jonathan said viciously. Because he knew you wouldn't come. Knew you wouldn't care? So don't act like you suddenly love him now that he's gone and you need to perform grief for the cameras. Taylor felt like he'd been shot. His father had been in the hospital. Scared, probably. Knowing his heart was failing, and he deliberately kept it from Taylor because he assumed, correctly, God help him, that Taylor wouldn't have come anyway. You're right, Taylor said, his voice hollow. You're absolutely right. I was a terrible son. I didn't deserve him. But you know the difference between us, Jonathan. I'm trying to become better. I'm trying to honor his legacy, to protect what he built, while you... Taylor straightened, forcing strength into his voice. You're stealing from a dead man while lecturing his son about loyalty. He looked around the table. The evidence is comprehensive and has been turned over to the district attorney's office. Criminal charges will be filed within the week. This board has a fiduciary duty to terminate Jonathan Sterling's position immediately and to pursue civil action for recovery of stolen assets. This is a coup, Jonathan hissed, a spoiled child trying to take control of a company he knows nothing about. Maybe, Taylor agreed, but I'm a spoiled child with $260 million worth of evidence. So I guess we'll see what matters more. The vote was unanimous. Jonathan Sterling was removed as board chairman, his access to company accounts revoked, security called to escort him from the building. As they led him out, Jonathan stopped at the door, looking back at Taylor. Your father would be ashamed of you, using me as a scapegoat for your own guilt, destroying the family to make yourself feel better. No, Taylor said quietly. My father would be sad. He'd be disappointed that his friend betrayed him. But he'd be glad that his company's integrity is being protected. That's what mattered to him. Not family politics, not personal relationships, doing what's right no matter the cost. After Jonathan was gone, the board discussed next steps, investigations, asset recovery, leadership transitions. Taylor participated, answered questions, but felt distant from it all. He'd won. His father's legacy was protected. Justice was being served. So why did he feel so empty? Taylor found Camille in his father's office. His office now, technically, though it still felt like trespassing. She was standing at the window, silhouette backlit by the city lights. You did it, she said without turning around. The board is already issuing statements. Jonathan's been formally terminated. The DA's moving forward with charges. He told me my father was in the hospital. Taylor said, his voice raw. A week before he died, and my father told people not to tell me because he knew I wouldn't come. Camille turned then, and the sympathy in her eyes nearly destroyed him. Taylor. He was right. If someone had called me, I would have made an excuse. Taylor collapsed into his father's chair, head in his hands. He was dying, and he knew his own son wouldn't come if he asked. Camille crossed the room, and to Taylor's surprise, she knelt beside the chair, her hand gentle on his arm. Your father understood you better than you understood yourself. He knew you were running from pain, the family dynamics, all of it. That doesn't make it okay. No, she agreed softly, but it makes it human. Taylor, you're not the first child to fail a parent. And your father never stopped hoping you'd find your way back. I'm too late. For him, yes, but not for his legacy. Not for the people who work here, who depend on this company. Not for the future he was building. She squeezed his arm. He would be so proud of what you did tonight. Taylor looked at her kneeling beside him, this fierce, intelligent, beautiful woman who'd saved him by telling him truths he didn't want to hear. I meant what I said about falling for you. I know. And I know you're scared I'm just projecting or seeking redemption. He reached out tentatively, touching her face. She didn't pull away. But Camille, every day I spend with you, I see something new that makes me fall harder. Taylor, I'm not asking for anything, he interrupted gently. I'm just telling you the truth. I know you don't want... Camille closed the gap between their faces, interrupting his words with a sudden and brief kiss. Camille? She met his eyes. Yes, Taylor. I'm starting to feel something. I'm just not ready to trust it yet. I can wait, Taylor said eagerly, and meant it, however long it takes. Good, because I'm not easy to win over. But her smile was genuine now, warm. Though I have to say, this version of you, humble, determined, actually showing up, is much more attractive than the arrogant playboy from the cemetery. Yeah, well, that guy was an idiot. He was, Camille agreed, but he's becoming someone pretty remarkable. They stood in the comfortable silence of understanding, as partners, as friends, and maybe as something more. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Jonathan Sterling's trial became a media sensation. The billionaire's brother-in-law, trusted advisor, revealed as a thief. The day Jonathan was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, Taylor felt no satisfaction. Just sadness for the man his uncle could have been. Margaret reached out tentatively, wanting to rebuild their relationship. It was slow, painful work. She testified against her brother, chose her son over her family of origin. Taylor appreciated the gesture, but knew trust would take years to rebuild. Some wounds were too deep for quick healing. Taylor threw himself into running Briggs Industries with the passion his father had shown. He expanded the scholarship program, established the Richard Briggs Memorial Innovation Fund for employee-driven projects, reinstated the community investment initiatives Jonathan had quietly defunded. And every decision, every initiative, every late night at the office, he worked alongside Camille. They were professional, but something blossomed between them that couldn't be denied. They were falling in love in slow motion, building something real on a foundation of shared purpose and genuine respect. It was late autumn when Taylor finally gathered his courage. He'd asked Camille to meet him at an unusual place, the cemetery, at his father's grave. She arrived to find the headstone cleaned, fresh flowers, wildflowers like she'd brought that first day, placed carefully at the base. And Taylor, in jeans and a simple sweater, holding a thick photo album. Hi, he said nervously. Thank you for coming. This is unexpected, Camille said, kneeling to touch the wildflowers. These are beautiful. I've been coming every week, Taylor admitted, talking to him, telling him about the company, about the changes we're making, about you. About me? I tell him everything about you. Taylor sat on the grass, patting the spot beside him. How brilliant you are. How you saved the company. how you're teaching me every day what it means to actually care about something beyond myself. Camille sat close enough that their shoulders touched. What does he say back? Nothing, obviously, but I like to think he's proud, that he's glad I finally pulled my head out of my... Taylor caught himself. That I finally woke up. He is proud, Camille said with certainty. Wherever he is, he's so proud of you. Taylor opened the photo album. Patricia gave me this. It was in his desk drawer. He'd been keeping it updated. The pages were filled with Taylor's life. Baby photos, school pictures, newspaper clippings about his rowing victories, his Princeton graduation announcement, even printouts of his social media posts. Every milestone documented, treasured, loved. He kept everything, Taylor said, his voice thick. Even when I wanted nothing to do with him. Even when I ignored his calls and avoided him publicly, he kept every piece of evidence that I existed, that I was his son. Camille turned pages slowly, seeing Richard Briggs's careful annotations. Future astronaut next to a photo of 6-year-old Taylor in a space costume. So proud, next to his high school diploma. He'll come back to me next to a magazine photo of Taylor at some party, looking lost despite the smile. He never gave up on you, Camille whispered. No, he just ran out of time. Taylor closed the album carefully. Camille, I asked you here because I need to tell you something in front of him. With him as my witness. Okay, she said carefully. Taylor took her hands. 6 months ago, you told me that time and consistency would prove whether what I feel is real. That I needed to be the man I was becoming not because you were watching, but because it's who I choose to be. I remember. But Camille, I need you to know, every single day I fall more in love with you. With your intelligence, your passion, your fierce loyalty. You're the most remarkable woman I've ever known, and I want to spend every day earning the honor of being by your side. Camille was crying openly now. You're impossible, you know that? I've been told. You've ruined me for anyone else. I can't stop thinking about you, can't stop watching you become this incredible man. Taylor's heart was hammering. Is that a good thing? It's terrifying, she said, but she was smiling through tears. Because I swore I wouldn't fall for you. Camille, I'm in love with you too, she said, the words tumbling out. Completely. Genuinely. Not because you're who your father wanted you to be, but because you're exactly who you are. Flawed and trying, real. Taylor felt like his chest would burst. Yeah? Yeah. She laughed, watery and joyful. Though it's really inconvenient because you're technically my boss now and this is going to be a whole HR thing. He kissed her. Finally, after months of restraint and patience and proving himself, Taylor Briggs kissed Camille Foster in front of his father's grave, and it felt like coming home to a place he'd never known existed. She kissed him back, her hands in his hair, tears mixing with laughter. And Taylor thought this moment of perfect connection, with someone who saw all of him and loved him anyway, this was what his father had been trying to teach him all along. That love isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's about showing up, being present, doing the work, choosing someone every single day. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Taylor looked at his father's headstone. I found her, Dad, he said softly. The woman who makes me want to be better. Who loves me not for who I was supposed to be, but for who I'm becoming. You were right. You were right about everything. Camille leaned her head on his shoulder. He knew you'd find your way. I wish he was here to see us together. I think he knows, Camille said, looking at the headstone with affection. Wherever he is, he knows. They sat there in the fading autumn light. Two people who'd been broken and angry and lost, who'd found each other in grief and built something beautiful from ashes. I love you, Taylor said to Camille, meaning it with every fiber of his being. I love you too, she replied, squeezing his hand. Now come on, we have a company to run and a legacy to honor. Together? Together, she confirmed. And as they drove away from the cemetery toward the city lights, toward the company and the future and all the work still to be done, Taylor felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear about second chances, redemption, and the transformative power of real love. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting these stories matter to you. Until next time, choose love, choose growth, and choose to become someone who builds bridges.